lot of updates in the Nolan Wells case. First, brand new video reportedly shows what could be the last known image of him before he disappeared. That footage, obtained by TMZ, was recorded on Horn Island just hours before he vanished. We'll get into what this could mean for the investigation. And attorney Ben Crump, who is representing Nolan Wells' family, just made a major announcement that the initial preliminary findings of that independent autopsy will come out tomorrow. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber.
Last known whereabouts, Horn Island, 2:23 p.m. July 4th. That is the entirety of what a timestamp can tell you. It cannot tell you what he was reaching for. Cannot tell you who else was standing on that deck. It cannot tell you why, roughly 2 hours later, a boat pulled away from that island without him on it. A timestamp is not a story. It is a single frame torn out of a much longer film, and the rest of that film is missing. Before we go deeper into what the records actually show, make sure you're subscribed to the Hidden Case Files, because we don't just cover the story, we follow the evidence. Picture it like this. A wide wind-blown stretch of sandbar off the Mississippi coast, dozens of boats anchored side by side, music, coolers, laughter, and somewhere inside that crowd, one bent-over figure in a pair of swim trunks becomes, days later, the only visual evidence that a young man named Nolan Wells was still alive.
Okay, so we're back with another Nolan Wells update, and this time we have more new video, and I'm very curious what role this is going to play in the investigation, because there is this video that has surfaced that could be the last known image captured of Nolan Wells before he disappeared, before his body was ultimately found. This footage was obtained by TMZ. It was reportedly recorded on Horn Island just hours before Nolan vanished. The person who captured this on film believed this was Nolan. They felt so strongly that they went to the sheriff's office and showed it to police. Now, if this is Nolan, you might be saying, well, why, right? Why did people believe that? Well, the video doesn't actually show his face. So why do people think it's him? What is this telling us about what happened then? So let me start here. Since we last talked about this case, a lot has happened. For example, it was this week when Nolan was laid to rest by his family and friends. Reverend Al Sharpton officiated the service. Tyler Perry apparently paid for the funeral. Sharpton made a huge announcement at the funeral regarding the investigation, and we're going to get more on that in a bit. But we also know the FBI is involved. They're investigating these apparent threats that were made against people connected to this case. Now, the specifics of these alleged threats, the substance, who it was sent to, but we know that the FBI is looking at.
That is the visual anchor of this entire case. Not a crime scene, not a courtroom, a blurry wide-panning cell phone shot of a party, where somewhere in the background, a life is quietly ending and nobody yet knows it. Here is what the public record actually establishes without embellishment. Nolan Wells, a young athlete with what family describes as legitimate NFL ambitions, was on Horn Island on July 4th. A now widely circulated photograph shows him on a boat with friends, wearing distinctive swim trunks. According to reporting on documents obtained by TMZ, a second piece of footage has surfaced, filmed by a bystander, reportedly timestamped 2:23 p.m., showing a man matching that same clothing, bent over the back deck of a different boat. The person who filmed it believed strongly enough that this was Nolan that they brought it directly to the sheriff's office. Ben Crump, the attorney representing the Wells family, has stated publicly that Nolan was last seen on the island around 3 p.m. The boat he was traveling with reportedly departed around 4:31 p.m.
Plan for this. Let's see what happens. Let me ask you about this footage that came out. So you have this footage obtained by TMZ, apparently recorded on Horn Island at 2:23 p.m. on July 4th. It was reportedly shown to the sheriff's office. You can seemingly see in the video the camera panning across these boats, people, all on the water, and there appears to be a man standing on the back deck of a boat. And he appears to be bending over, reaching for something. You can't see his face, but the person who shot this video believes it was Nolan. Why? The man is apparently wearing swim trunks that match the color of the swim trunks that Nolan was wearing in that July 4th photo that everybody has seen. It's a very famous photo, right? Infamous photo. Now, this is, again, the one with his friends on the boat. If this is Nolan, this video would seemingly be the last known image of him before he vanished and before his body washed up ashore just days later. When you see this video, what stands out to you when you watch it?
Well, the first thing that stands out to me is, number one, it's a proof of life. If in fact that is him, then we know that he's alive at that date and that time, based on the metadata that they can pull off of that particular video. The secondary thing that jumps out at me is you have all of these other boats around him at that point. So that means you can also get the GPS data in relationship to these other individuals around him from those other boats. So that now puts him in a particular location at a particular time. And it also tells us that if in fact he is in that is him, what's he getting on the back of that boat? So you have all kinds of information that you can glean from the fact that he may be leaning over, getting something out of the cooler, et cetera, or water, or who knows what that substance is. But now an investigator can go back and say, okay, who owned this boat? What's in that cooler? And then you can actually trace that back to maybe, other activities taking place earlier in the day, and then correlate that to potentially any other toxicology results down the line. If in fact it was a substance that, maybe alcohol or something. And we don't know that. Okay. But those are the kind of things that you can get from it. But more importantly, you can get the metadata from the GPS of all the other boats around there. And then you can correlate that to where his body was found later on, and then kind of connect those dots. How did it go from point A? How did he go from point A to point Z? And try to put that puzzle together.
Again, the video was recorded at 2:23 p.m., right? Ben Crump has said that Nolan was last seen on the island at 3 p.m. I haven't seen any contradicting account of that. It's 3 p.m. seems to be the time that we're hearing. But again, something could change. And we believe that boat left at around 4:31 p.m. So there's about this 2-hour window between this video and when the boat apparently left without him.
Do the math yourself. That is roughly 2 hours in which a documented, physically present young man becomes an unaccounted for missing person, and no public filing yet explains what filled that gap. This is where the case stops being a headline and starts being a structural problem. Because official records do not build narratives out of feelings, they build them out of gaps, and gaps are where the real story lives. A body was later recovered. A funeral was held on July 20th at Centerpoint Church in Ocean Springs. Reverend L. Sharpton officiated. According to statements made at that service, Sharpton pledged $50,000 from the National Action Network toward information leading to an arrest and conviction, and actor Tyler Perry, who reportedly covered funeral costs, matched it, bringing the public reward to $100,000. Sharpton said it plainly on record at the pulpit. He was not on that island by himself. Somebody saw something and knows something.
Said at the funeral.
Since Mississippi's so special, I'm not only saying we don't want nothing. I want to say right here now, and I'm inspired by who accused us of that I want to put up from National Action Network and me. I want to offer a reward of $50,000 to anybody I want to put a reward up for $50,000 for anybody that could give the information that will lead to an arrest and a conviction in the case of what happened. He was not on that island by himself. Somebody saw something and knows something. So I didn't come to make money. I came to give money. Stand up and tell the truth. Whatever it is. good or bad. We're not going to prejudge it, but we cannot end it until we know all the facts. Let me say to Christine and Elmo, before we do the prayer of committal and escort the family out, I just got a text, Christine and Elmo, you know that Tyler Perry said he would pay for the funeral. He must be watching because he said, I'm going to match you and put up $50,000 more. So we putting up $100,000 for anybody that'll come forward. We just want the truth, that's all.
That is not speculation. That is a public statement made at a public funeral, entered into the public narrative of this case. Now consider the phone. Not a minor detail, the central missing exhibit. Nolan's phone was not with him when he was reported missing. It was reportedly recovered later with his friends, and the family has stated they discovered activity through a location tracking application. There have been public allegations that data may have been deleted from that device. As a result, the family's own experts and state investigators are reportedly set to conduct a joint inspection of the phone. Sit with that for a second. A young man goes missing near open water, and the one object capable of reconstructing his final hours, his location, his messages, his last contact, is the one object that didn't go missing with him. A phone left behind near saltwater is not automatically suspicious. People leave phones on boats every day. But a phone left behind, followed by an allegation of deleted data, followed by a demand for a joint forensic inspection, that is not a coincidence anymore.
As for the phone, Nolan's phone, the family has it, and after saying they believe data may have been deleted off that phone, it was announced that they're going to inspect that phone alongside state investigators and their own experts from the family. And this is all while the potential for a grand jury may be impaneled to hear this case. That is looming in the background. And we're still waiting on the autopsy results, right? The autopsy from the state examination and the autopsy from the independent autopsy that was ordered by Nolan Wells' family. So all of this is going on, and now I want to talk about what's happening with this video. Now, I said that the results haven't come out yet, but literally
That is a pattern the record itself is now forcing investigators to explain. So here is the ticking clock moment, the question this case actually turns on. If a phone can tell you everything except the one window of time that matters most, what does its silence actually protect? Because that silence is doing work here. It is the bureaucratic equivalent of a locked drawer inside an otherwise open filing cabinet. Everything else in this case, the funeral, the reward, the boat records, the video, is public. But the 2 hours between the last confirmed sighting and the boat's departure remain sealed inside a device the family says may have already been altered. A record is not the truth. A record is only as honest as the hands that last touched it. That brings us to the independent autopsy, and this is the moment the public record itself accelerated the timeline. According to a press release from Ben Crump's office, preliminary findings from an independent autopsy, conducted on the family's behalf, were set to be announced publicly, notably before the results of the state's own medical examination were released. That sequencing matters. In most cases, the state's findings anchor the narrative and any independent review responds to it. Here, the family's findings are positioned to arrive first.
At the time of this recording, we just got word from Ben Crump, so this is the attorney representing Nolan Wells' family, that there is going to be a press conference tomorrow, and I'm going to read you exactly what it says. This is from a press release. Nationally renowned civil rights and personal injury attorney Ben Crump will join the family of Nolan Xavier Wells at a news conference Wednesday at the 117th NAACP National Convention. Crump will announce the preliminary findings of an independent autopsy conducted on behalf of the family. Wow. Okay, so the video.
Investigators who specialize in drowning cases have noted publicly that microscopic evidence, fluid in the lungs or airway, can establish whether a person was alive at the moment they entered the water, and that toxicology results, still pending from the state examiner, will determine what substances, if any, were in his system. Until those two reports are compared side by side, the public record contains two competing versions of the same body, and no official resolution of which one is complete. Officially recorded fact. A healthy young man attended a 4th of July celebration on a public island. Officially recorded fact. He did not leave with the group he arrived with. Officially recorded fact. His body was later found. A badge is not a shield. A badge is not a shield. Let that sit as we move into what the reward money actually represents, because it is not what most people assume. A $100,000 public reward does not exist in a vacuum. Investigators with experience in high-profile disappearance cases have noted, on record, that reward funds rarely produce breakthrough witnesses from people already motivated by silence or fear.
Absolutely.
And I know the sheriff's office has asked that for unedited photos and videos from that day, but it just made me thought of it.
Yeah, and that's obviously going to be, again, that's going to put everything back into the column of proof of life. We know that this young man is just enjoying a July 4th celebration, and that there's nothing afoot here, right? Suspicious in nature. So it can go either way. If those dynamics changed, then what changed between that video and where his body was found? And this will lean the investigators into looking at that type of evidence pretty much harder.
And I also want to ask you something else about this, because there are other significant developments that have come out from this funeral service, other than the fact that it was just incredibly heartbreaking to hear, Nolan's family talking about him and what it's like to not have them in their life anymore. And just think about how he was an athlete. He had these NFL ambitions. He was a role model to his siblings, just an incredible young man, and how much of a tragedy this is. But this funeral service that was held on July 20th at the Centerpoint Church in Ocean Springs out in Mississippi, hundreds of people showed up. Al Sharpton made a big announcement that he and the actor Tyler Perry, they each put up apparently $50,000 for information leading to a possible conviction, or, again, information about what happened to Nolan Wells. So you're looking at $100,000 total for anyone who comes forward. This is what he said.
But they can motivate a very specific category of person. Someone who already has footage, already suspected it was relevant, and simply hadn't come forward. That is precisely the category this newly surfaced Horn Island video appears to fall into. One witness came forward voluntarily, before any reward was announced. The sheriff's office has since made public requests for unedited photos and video from that day. If one bystander felt strongly enough to walk into a sheriff's office unprompted, the mathematically obvious question is how many more clips are sitting unexamined on private phones right now, filed under nothing, waiting for someone to realize what they're looking at. And this is where the case's most serious possible outcome enters the public record. According to statements attributed to the district attorney's office, once the investigation concludes, this case could be presented to a grand jury for potential criminal charges.
Nature.
And according to Ben Crump during a press conference last week, the DA apparently told him that once this investigation is complete, this case could be presented to a grand jury for potential criminal charges being filed. In what capacity, we wouldn't know, right? It could be, let's say, a potential homicide charge, could be something with respect to the investigation, someone not providing accurate information to law enforcement, maybe it's tampering with evidence. What do you make of that potentiality of this case being presented to a grand jury?
Well, anything is always possible. And if in fact this, the investigation starts pointing towards, hey, the timeline, the witness statements, a lot of that information's not lining up. I had a case one time where a guy disappeared off of a boat, and we found some powder on the boat, and it was from a fire extinguisher. And we discovered later on in the investigation that the individual was telling us lies, and we were able to determine that in fact he had fired the fire extinguisher at the victim, and that there was a major altercation on this boat, and one person fell over and one person came back. And is this that type of situation? Is there a fight that took place, or even if somebody's horsing around? As kids do, as young men do nowadays, and he got hurt and they left him. They left him in the water. Well, that would be obviously information you'd want to establish. And so there's a lot of information that's still needed. The investigation, in my opinion, would still be fluid. But yes, a grand jury could come back with accessory after the fact, and or other charges, manslaughter or something to that effect. We just don't know yet.
The record does not specify what those charges might be. It could range from providing false information to law enforcement, to evidence tampering, to something far more serious, depending entirely on what the dual autopsy comparison and the phone inspection ultimately reveal. A badge is not a shield. Not for the people who may have last stood beside Nolan Wells on that boat, and not for a system that will eventually have to explain, on the record, why 2 hours of a young man's life remain the one piece of this story nobody has yet accounted for. So we are left, once again, with the unanswered question. The video exists. The reward exists. The funeral has happened. The independent autopsy findings are entering the public record. But the phone, the one object built to answer everything, remains only partially explained. A badge is not a shield. It is a record. And a record only protects the people willing to let it stay incomplete. This is where you come in. We are directing you to one specific document. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office Incident Report and Evidence Request Bulletin tied to the Nolan Wells missing person investigation, publicly referenced in connection with the July 4th Horn Island timeline. It is part of the active public record surrounding this case. Read what has been released. Compare it to the timestamp on that boat footage. Then ask yourself and tell us in the comments. What do you believe happened in the 2 hours between 2:23 and 4:31 p.m.? If you found this breakdown valuable, hit that like button, share it with someone following this case, and subscribe to the Hidden Case Files. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next update, because the silence in a record is never the end of a story. It is the opening of the investigation.